section in the surah. This is going to be our last Quran study class ever. No, just kidding. For this surah, inshallah. But we're going to take a little break, and then we're going to resume probably in January, inshallah. So we'll take December off. We'll resume in the month of January. First or second week of January, inshallah ta'ala. Yes. That's a good question. We're going to decide at the end of class. Should we continue to Ma'idah or should we skip to another surah like Surah Yusuf? We'll talk at the end of class, inshallah. All right, let's get started on this class though. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Okay, so we're at section 24 and we're on verse 172. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, after A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, لن يستنكف المسيح أن يكون عبدا لله ولا الملائكة المقربون. The Messiah would never be too proud to be a servant of Allah, nor would the angels nearest to Allah. So who's the Messiah? Who's he referring to? Prophet Isa alayhi salam, right? He's the Messiah. Messiah means, what does the Messiah even mean? Who knows? Besides 2, 3. Yes, what is the Messiah? The true Christians? Oh, that's a really good guess. This one is referring not to the people who are going to follow Prophet Isa, but it's referring to Prophet Isa himself. So what does the actual word Messiah itself mean? Yes. Prophet, good guess as well, but it's close, but not exactly prophet. In the back there, yes. Messiah, yes. Anointed, very good. How many of you know what the word anointed means? So almost nobody knows this word anointed. So outside of the Christian context, no one has ever heard the word anointed before. Go to any high school or college and ask anyone who is not a church-going Christian, what does the word anointed mean? And they won't be able to tell you. Ask them what does the word ablution mean? And they won't be able to tell you. Right? So it's always best to try to avoid words which the majority of the American population doesn't know. Right? But you're right, it does mean anointed. So what does anointed mean? It's my question to you. Selected, it means chosen, you're right. So anointed means selected or chosen. And what Masih means in this sense, it means that he was chosen and this was the person that the people were waiting for to come. They were waiting for another prophet who would be their leader to come. So that's pretty much what this word means. Okay? So it's talking about Prophet Isa. And this is his nickname. So why is it his nickname? Because the children of Israel, the Bani Israel, were waiting for this other prophet, Prophet Isa, to come. And they had certain signs that he's going to be coming. And they were mentioned in their book. So they were waiting. And then when he came, they didn't like him. And they rejected him. So that's why he's being referred to as a title, as being the chosen one, the awaited one that people have been waiting for. But what did the people who accepted him do after he was gone from this earth? They started worshiping him. So now Allah is criticizing the people who started worshiping him, like we saw in the previous verse, where it said, do not say Trinity. Remember last week we talked about that? So do not say that there's a Trinity. Do not say that there's Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, and all three people are one person and all of that stuff, and they're all equally divine persons, and you can equally worship all of them. Don't say stuff like that. Prophet Isa was not divine, and he's not God, and he's not the Son of God, outside of a metaphorical sense, like other people are children of God. So now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that, you know what? Prophet Isa, he would never be too proud or be upset of being called the servant of Allah. So his description would be the servant of Allah. That's how he would describe himself. And if you take a look at even the current day Bible today, you will find Prophet Isa, Jesus in the Bible, himself stating that, you know what, God is my Lord, and he's praying to God. So this is directly in line with what Prophet Isa even taught, as well as what's remnants in the books of the Christians themselves. وَلَا الْمَلَائِكَةُ الْمُقَرَّبُونَ. Nor would the angels nearest to Allah ever be too proud to say that we're servants of Allah. Of course, the angels, they do whatever Allah tells them to do. But the angels are angelic spiritual beings made of, what are they made of? Just shout it out. Light, made of light. So they're more angelic than, obviously they're angelic, they're angels. That's kind of like a self-definition. But these are special creatures that are different than human beings, and they also would not look down upon being called servants of Allah, because being called a servant of Allah is a respectable title. There's nothing humiliating about it. It's actually, when you're a servant of Allah, you're not a servant of anything else. So it's saying the angels would not shy away from that either. Now, why is this verse saying this? This verse is saying, why is this verse saying this? Yeah, it's an angel. Yeah. So maybe you're talking about the second part, right? The second part of this? Yeah, okay. So the second part is, there's two parts to this. The first part, why is Allah saying that Prophet Isa would not be too proud to be a servant of Allah? I was actually asking a rhetorical question. I know you guys are, mashallah, participating. It's beautiful. So I'll just answer my own question. The reason why is because when Isa, Prophet Jesus, was described as a servant of Allah, some of the Christians got upset and say, no, that's not right. That's disgraceful. You're humiliating him. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is responding, saying, no, this is, being described as a servant of Allah is actually an honorable thing. It's not a dishonorable thing. So you should be dishonored. And the angels themselves would not be dishonored either. They would not be bothered. In fact, they would be proud to be called servants of Allah, because Allah knows the reality of things. And it's also connected, because some of the people, especially like Catholics, they venerate certain angels to the extent that they almost make them like divine. And there's certain days where they praise certain angels, and they have certain candles that they light for certain angels and all of these things. So it almost like became what's called angelolatry, where you basically are almost worshiping certain angels as well. So this is putting a stop to that notion. وَمَن يَسْتَنْكِفْ عَنْ عِبَادَتِهِ وَيَسْتَكْبِرْ فَسَيَحْشُرُهُمْ إِلَيْهِ جَمِيعًا. Those who are too proud and arrogant to worship Him, meaning Allah, will be brought before Him all together. So on the Day of Judgment, Allah is going to bring all those people who were too proud and arrogant to worship Allah. So now Allah turns the argument around. It says, not only would Prophet Isa, who you guys are worshipping, not only would he be proud to describe himself as a servant of Allah, the people who are worshipping him instead of worshipping Allah, because they're too proud to worship Allah directly, Allah is going to hold them accountable on the Day of Judgment. So He's basically flipping the argument on them and saying, you guys are the problem when it comes to these things. Next verse. فَأَمَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ فَيُوَفِّيهِمْ أُجُورَهُمْ وَيَزِيدُهُمْ مِنْ فَضْلِهِ. As for those who believe and do good, He will reward them in full and increase them as His blessing. So now, we see this so many times in the Quran, that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala threatens with the punishment of the hellfire, which is what He just did in the previous verse. Everyone's going to be gathered on the Day of Judgment, and they're going to be in big trouble. And then the next verse, and as for the good people, they're going to get Jannah. And sometimes you see it the other way around. It talks about Jannah. So if you do this, you go to Jannah. And then Allah flips it around and says, as for those who do bad, it's going to be punishment. It's always a balance between the carrot and the stick. What they call the motivation and the threat and the warning. So it's always there in the Quran, almost always there, because it balances things out. So Allah is saying those who believe and do good, they're going to get their full reward. But Allah is so merciful, He's going to give them fadl. And fadl means He gives them an increase on top of that. Meaning He's not only going to give you what you deserve, He's going to give you more reward than what you deserve. Allah never says that He's going to punish you and then He's going to punish you more than you deserve. Never that way. But the other way, always. Allah will always reward you more than you deserve. He will never punish you or hold you accountable more than you deserve. وَأَمَّا الَّذِينَ اسْتَنكَفُوا وَاسْتَكْبَرُوا فَيُعَذِّبُهُمْ عَذَابًا أَلِيمًا وَلَا يَجِدُونَ لَهُم مِّن دُونِ اللَّهِ وَلِيًّا وَلَا نَصِيرًا. But those who are too proud and arrogant, He will punish them with a painful punishment, and they will find no protector or helper besides Allah. And they're not worshiping Allah, and they're not going to turn to Allah, or they have not been turning to Allah, so they're going to be in trouble. Nobody can help them besides Allah. So Allah is emphasizing the people who are arrogant and the people who think that they're better than others. So this is the root cause of many evils in the world and many causes of evil of people's behavior. يا أيها الناس قد جاءكم برهان من ربكم. People, there has come to you conclusive evidence from your Lord. Now the word burhan means like proof. In this context, the proof is referring to the Prophet. Okay, it's referring to the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. So all the arguments now have been made previously about the Jews, towards the Jews. Then the arguments were made towards the Christians. Now it's coming back, because the surah is concluding, and it's saying, now you guys have another prophet. So it talked about how people rejected Prophet Musa and what they did with their other prophets. Then it talked about how people messed up when it came to Prophet Isa. So now Allah is saying, you have an evidence in front of you, and you got another prophet in front of you now being sent. Make sure you don't mess up when it comes to this prophet that's sent to you. وَأَنزَلْنَا إِلَيْكُمْ نُورًا مُبِينًا. And we have sent down to you a clear light. Clear light is referring to the Quran. So it's like that when the prophet comes, he brings a light. And what does a light do? A light lets you be able to see in the darkness. When you're in the darkness, when you're in ignorance, when you don't know how to live your life, you don't know what to do, you don't know how to behave, you don't know what to believe in, that's like darkness of ignorance. And when the Prophet comes and he brings this Quran, this is a light that shows you what you're supposed to do. It's like a light that you can see. It's like if you're in the darkness and you didn't know where to go, and you're lost, and you don't know what's the correct way to go. Somebody turns on a flashlight, and that flashlight is your light, which helps guide you so that you can see the correct way to go. That's exactly what the Quran is. That's exactly what the Prophet is. So he's being described with a perfect word for him, and a perfect word for the Quran, that he is a clear light, and the Quran is a clear light that shows you the way of how you should live your life. فَأَمَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا بِاللَّهِ وَاعْتَصَمُوا بِهِ فَسَيُدْخِلُهُمْ فِي رَحْمَةٍ مِّنْهُ وَفَضْلٍ وَيَهْدِيهِمْ إِلَيْهِ صِرَاطًا مُسْتَقِيمًا. As for those who believe in Allah, meaning they believe in Allah the correct way, not just believing in the existence of Allah, and they stick to Him. They stick to Allah, not literally obviously, but meaning they stick to Allah by following the guidance of Allah. They don't pick and choose whatever they want, but they're firm in that. He will admit them into His mercy and His grace, or His blessings. And He will guide them to Himself through a straight path. So it's very important to remember what a straight path means. When you're being guided through a straight path, the shortest, this is an old famous mathematical statement, the shortest distance between 2 points is what? A straight line. If you have 2 points and you say, I want to get from here to here, and someone goes, well, I think I'm going to go take this route, go down here, and then come all the way back here. Is that a longer or a shorter route than just going straight? It's a much longer route. The shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. All right? So the straight path means that it's the direct way to get to Allah. It's the shortest, the correct, and the best way to get to the truth. And what happens with people is when they're going somewhere, they're going from one place to another and trying to get to the truth, and they get lost. They're like, hey man, you should go this way. Someone misguiding you. Oh, I should go that way? Okay, let me try there. So if you've ever been hiking and you got lost, anyone ever been hiking and got lost and didn't know how to get back down? This only happens to me. Huh? You hiked, but you never got lost. MashaAllah. Well, you went with the wrong people, because the people I went with, they got lost. Okay, so you gotta be careful who you go with. I would go with you next time. So you get lost, and then you have some people who don't know what they're doing. There's always gonna be one person or two people. They're like, I think it's this way. And you're like, are you sure? Yeah, I'm really sure. This person doesn't know what they're doing. You go the wrong way, and you just keep getting lost further and further. And then when you finally look at your chart later on, you're like, well, where did we go? You map. Oh, ended up going this way, all around, and we should have just gone straight towards exit. That's all we needed to do. So that is what Allah means by Allah will guide people to Himself, to Allah, through a straight path. Not all the way around, twisting, turning, going all these different directions that don't help you get to where you are supposed to go. The last verse in Surah An-Nisa, if you remember in the beginning of Surah An-Nisa, we covered some rules about something in Islamic law. Quite a lot of rules in the beginning. Who remembers what those rules were about? Omar, what were they about? You saw my slides, man. So you don't get. What were those rules about? Yeah. Gotta speak louder. Wills and how to treat orphans. Very good. What do you mean by wills? When somebody dies, what do you do? Very good. So the beginning of the surah is connected to the end of the surah. So we talked about wills and inheritance and what happens to somebody's possessions and money that they leave behind when they pass away. Now, the last verse of Surah An-Nisa connects to the beginning of Surah An-Nisa by talking about one more issue that is related to inheritance. So it comes like this. يَسْتَفْتُونَكَ قُلِ اللَّهُ يُفْتِيكُمْ فِي الْكَلَالَةِ. They ask you and say that Allah gives you a ruling about kalala. Kalala means people who die and there's no children and there's no parents. So people were asking, who were they asking? They were asking the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, about an inheritance question. Because if we look at all the verses about inheritance that we looked at, it talked about if you have parents, and your parents get this much money. And if you have children, your children get this much money. And if this happens, then this. Well, some people came along and they said, Messenger of Allah, what if somebody dies and they have no parents and they have no children? Then what do we do? Because a lot of scenarios were described and we went through the rules of inheritance, if you remember. If you remember your fractions, we also learned math. We got a good mathematics review of how to add fractions and how to reduce fractions and all of that. So now they're being asked, the Messenger of Allah is being asked, what about someone who's in a state of kalala, where they don't have children or parents and they pass away? What do we do about those rules? So there's going to be a whole different set of rules. But this used to be rare in the past. So this is a different set of rules. So Allah says that Allah is going to give you an answer. Say, Allah is giving you the answer for that. إِنِ امْرُؤٌ حَلَكَ لَيْسَ لَهُ وَلَدٌ وَلَهُ أُخْتٌ فَلَهَا نِصْفُ مَا تَرَكَ. If somebody dies and they have no child, so it says no child, but it also implies no parents, because that's what kalala means. So if they have no child and no parents, but the person has a sister, and the scholars explain even if he has half a sister, right? Or she has half a sister, she will get half, the sister will get half of what the person left behind. What happens to the rest of it? The rest of the other half will go to the other heirs that are there. And if there's no other heirs, what happens to the money? She gets the rest of it. Right? So she's going to get the rest of it. وَهُوَ يَرِثُهَا إِن لَّمْ يَكُن لَّهَا وَلَدٌ. And her brother will get everything. So the flip side, her brother is going to get everything he leaves if she dies and she has no child, which also means that she has no parents. So it's explaining what's going to happen. What is the brother going to get? What is the sister going to get? فإن كانت اثنتين فلهما الثلثان مما ترك. If this person leaves behind two sisters, and also by implication two or more sisters, then they're going to get 2/3 of what he left behind. So here's the rule when it comes to inheritance. The rule is that if the sister is going to be inheriting, she's going to be inheriting when somebody dies and there are no parents and there are no children to be inheriting. If there are, she's going to be blocked, she's not going to get anything. But if she's going to be inheriting, if there's one, she's going to get half of all the money that's left. And if there's two or more, they're going to get 2/3. So then you have to figure out how they're going to split it. So let's say there's 7 sisters. How much do they inherit? They're going to split 2/3. How much does each one get? I won't do it right now. There's a math problem for you. We should do that. We should have done that in the Kahoot. Next time we're going to do that. So you add it up and you let me know. All right, it's not that difficult math. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continues. وَإِن كَانُوا إِخْوَةً رِجَالًا وَنِسَاءً فَلِلذَّكَرِ مِثْلُ حَظِّ الْأُنثَيَيْنِ. If there are brothers and sisters, both, then the male will get that of 2 females, the double share. And we talked about that in the beginning. And we talked about why the male is getting more than the female in the same line. Even though sometimes the females will get more if they're in a different line than the males will get. Who remembers why that is? Why the male in the same line will get more? Yeah.
My understanding, when male marries and then they have a wife, the baby is wife and he and then her wife, they're common because male responsible to her wife
Financially. Exactly. So basically the male has financial responsibility not only on his wife, but on the rest of his family. Right? So therefore, because there's a greater financial burden, he's also going to be equipped with more money to be able to take care of the family. If you remove the financial responsibility, then you don't need the extra money. So that's the way it works. You have to take the whole Sharia as a whole. يُبَيِّنُ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ أَن تَضِلُّوا. Allah makes this clear to you so you do not make a mistake. Right? So actually the wording here is so that you're not misguided. But in the context here, it means you don't make a mistake out of ignorance and you go off and you do wrong things when it comes to people's inheritance because you can end up wronging somebody. Wallahu bi kulli shay'in alim. Allah knows all things. When he says Allah knows all things, it means Allah knows what is good for people. And these rules are good for the general people throughout the world, both historically as well as present, and in people in different cultures. There's always going to be some exceptions, but exceptions never make the rule. The general rule is good for all people. So, with that, this surah ends. And the last verse here, there are a few reasons why this verse is the last verse in the surah. Reason number 1 is because we talked about inheritance in the beginning, and there's inheritance connecting in the end. So there's 2 connections there. The second reason is because you find that it talks about the knowledge and the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the beginning, and it talks about the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at the end. Right? So there's a third reason that's mentioned as well, but you find that there's a connection between the beginning of a surah and the end of a surah in many cases. And you find that there's a connection between the end of one surah and the beginning of the next surah as well. So there's some discussion that scholars have had, but that is part of what we covered here. So we're going to leave it at that. I'm going to open it up to questions. But before I open it up to questions and launch the Kahoot, we have to decide which surah we should be covering in January after our break. So we have the option of doing either one, continuing in order, which would be Surah Al-Ma'idah, which comes next, and we just keep on going through the Quran, like some other imams and other masjids, like Dr. Mazam al-Siddiqui had done, and he covers like a tafsir every 20 years. So that's probably what it'll take to like finish this entire thing at this pace. Option number two is we skip and we jump and we go to some other surahs like Surah Yusuf, which has more of a story, and we go to like some other surahs in the Quran which are a little bit more maybe structured in a different way or have a story or something like that. So there's only two options here. So option number one is go through the rest of the Quran in order. Surah number 5 is next. Option number two is select certain surahs afterwards. Okay? These are the two options. Who would like, you don't have to vote by the way. Who would like option one? Go in order. Keep going. Who would like option two? Okay. And who wasn't even listening to what I'm saying? Okay, mashallah. At least it was honesty, alhamdulillah. So I think what we'll do is we'll probably go with option one, unless I change my mind and somebody talks to me afterwards. All right. A Kahoot vote at the end? Oh, add it in there? I think we're good. Yeah, we're good. Okay, questions on what we covered so far? Anyone had a question? You raised your hand. I saw you had a question before? No? Cancelled? Anyone else have a question? Yes. Yeah. Oh, that said the sister when there was no brothers. And then the second part said when there are brothers and sisters, then it talks about how they're going to split the amount of money. So it was just talking about the sisters when there are no brothers. It didn't mean that they're neglecting the brothers. Yeah, in the back.
What's the difference between the kalala in this verse and the kalala in the first verses where وإن كان رجل يوجد كلالة أو امرأة وله أخ فكل واحد منهما
We'll talk afterwards because I have to explain the whole thing again. So yeah, in the back there. You have to speak louder, please. You said pay off the debt. If somebody dies and they're in debt, yes, debt and funeral expenses need to be taken out first, and the bequest wasiya is also taken out first.
So when you mentioned about how Isa alayhi salam was the Messiah as the chosen one, and you talked about how he was the chosen one of the children of Israel at that time. I'm pretty sure I also heard about how he's like the chosen one like near before the judgment. Like I think does that verse apply to that meaning as well?
That's by extension. Now the verse, the whole point of calling him that was primarily for the first group of people that he was sent to, not the second group. Yeah. Oh, okay. So the question is, can a wasiya or the bequest override the inheritance of what the kids get or something like that? No. There's a principle, which we covered before. The principle is based on the statement of the Prophet, peace be upon him, that there's no wasiya for a warith. So anyone who's going to inherit already, they cannot inherit by bequest. So they're exempt. So you cannot say, when you say, I want my best friend to get 10% of the money I left behind, you can do that. You cannot say, I want my son to get 10% of the money I left behind, because that would override the share that they're already getting. They're already guaranteed a share. You cannot specify anyone who's already going to inherit into the bequest. Yes. I can't. Super short, yeah. So super short is that men have a greater financial responsibility than women when it comes to a few things. Number one, when they're married, the man is responsible for financially taking care of the wife in terms of her needs, in terms of the household expenses, in terms of food, in terms of clothing, in terms of those things. The man is also responsible for taking care of his parents, for example, and other family members that he's directly responsible for, like the children, and most importantly, his parents. When it comes to a female, let's say parents have a son and a daughter, and the daughter has money and the son has money. Do they need to equally split? And let's say the parents become poor. Do they need to equally split who takes care of the parents? The answer is no. The son is going to have a much greater responsibility of having to pay, and the daughter will only kick in and help out if the son is not able to help. So he has the primary financial responsibility even towards his own parents. So those are some examples of greater financial responsibility. Okay. Yes.
The last verse was talking about sisters and brothers. If a person does not have a child like that, but if that person had a wife who is left behind, how will that work out in this particular case?
So the wife and husband, they have a set share that they're always going to inherit. Right.
That is after whatever there is remaining, that is what is coming from. It goes to the sister.
Yeah. So when it said half for the sister, for example, right? That's going to be the wife and the husband is always going to get their share. So it's going to be either an eighth, or it's going to be a fourth, or it's going to be a half. It's going to be one of these three potential shares, and that's excluding that.
In the previous question, where like why is the son receiving more than the woman for the daughter, because the man was financial responsibility. Why was if he's twice now it mentioned because if he's married, he has responsibility to the wife, like to his wife. His wife has nothing to do with her in-laws leaving an inheritance. Like I understand the fact that like the son is responsible for his sister, right? And so why doesn't the sister inherit as much? Because well, he's obligated towards her anyway. But the fact that he married and has kids has nothing to do with. She could also be married or be a single mom with kids. Like, why is that part of the conversation?
It's part of the conversation because when the money transfers to any male and the money transfers to any female, they continue throughout their life doing something. They're going to have some future family relationships, and they're going to have future family financial obligations. So it's talking about their future financial family obligations that are going to either be immediate, or they're going to be 10 years down the road, or they're going to be 20 years down the road. Something is going to happen where they have kids, or where they get remarried, or whether their parents don't have the means to support themselves. So the financial responsibility is going to kick in either immediately, or it's going to kick in later. And because, according to Sharia, the males have greater financial responsibility, that's why they're going to be inheriting a little bit more, because they have the burden of greater financial responsibility. Does that make sense? What part is not making sense?
The fact that the son, but in that case, it seems like then there should be a conversation of, well, if there's another son and he's incapable of having children, then the son that is capable of having children should inherit more than the other. But that's never a conversation. Like future families are not part of what's being discussed here, right? Like a son owning his sister is within the picture of this conversation, but future families and future wives and
This conversation is only about money transfer. It's not okay. If we leave the who died and what connection they had, that's to the side. People are getting money. What are they going to do with that money? The people who have greater financial responsibility are going to lose more money faster than the people who have less financial responsibility. That's what's being discussed.
but you're not comparing, let's say, two sons, one that already has 10 kids and one who's, for example, never is capable of having 10 kids, and there's no conversation of, well, this one has has more responsibility, so he should inherit more than the
That's not the way it was viewed classically. The reason why is because throughout history, people didn't look at that and say, you know what, this person has this many kids and this person is not capable of earning. This is a very modern concept that we look at these things. This person can be capable within 5 years or within 10 years, right? Why can't that person become capable? This is a modern way of looking at things to say this person doesn't have the earning capacity as the other person.
Well, that's not earning.
Mm.
If there's a conversation of why is like the reason why a son inherits more is because he has a wife and he has kids.
No, that's not what I'm saying. It's not because he has a wife and he has kids. Either he does or he might in the future. Yeah, okay.
I'm saying if that's part of the conversation,
Uh-huh.
then like to me that's the part that it doesn't make sense. Why is that part of the conversation? Because let's say there's two sons, one is incapable of having kids or incapable of getting like married or whatever, doesn't want to get married or whatever.
That's what I mean by that's a modern issue. There's nobody in the past said this son didn't want to get married. Like this is something that someone classically would never think of, right? People in the past would not be like, you know what, this person doesn't want to get married, so let's take into consideration his circumstances. This is, universally, this is more of a modern thing, and people can, the family can come together and compensate for that, right? If that's the issue. But this was not a concern. So Allah didn't want to give a whole manual of inheritance with like so many details, because considering all these factors would have made things too complicated. So He gave general rules that apply across the board. Anything that doesn't work out within a specific family, the family mutually comes together and supports each other. These are technical rules. The family needs to work together to support these, like to figure out these other issues. That's what families are supposed to do. That's generally how it should be working, inshallah. Or we can talk further afterwards, inshallah. Okay. We need to get to Kahoot. Any other like quick questions? Go ahead. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Becomes what? So there are technical rules, and then there's good behavior, right? People get stuck on the technical rules. Technically, what does someone have to pay? And who needs to do this and who needs to do that? The technical rules are that whoever has money should be supporting the family. The males have a greater responsibility than the females. Simple as that, right? Those situations where this person cannot do it, becomes incapacitated, is not able to earn as much, cannot save as much, happens to live in a city like Irvine and doesn't have any money left over or something like that, the family needs to get together and figure that out, and that's good behavior. So the technical rules are very few. Everything else comes back down to negotiating with the family and having good character. You say it, last question.
So I'm gonna make it super quick. So basically, my question is, so since men are receiving more inheritance than women, right? Does that mean that the family members of the man have a right to that money that the man is receiving as well, since he's receiving more?
Which family members of the man?
Like those he has responsibility over, like his wife, and basically those are his control.
You mean will it trickle down into his family because he received the extra money that he's receiving?
Yeah, like, do they have a right to it?
They don't have. It's not that they have a right to, but you're right in the sense that it'll trickle down. It'll increase their standard of living, so it will trickle down into the family. So that's a really good observation, actually.
What if he wants to just like use that all on himself, like his car, his clothes, his house expensive? Does he allowed to do that?
So that's a technicality, right? So a man has the responsibility to spend in the way that's best for his family and how he thinks fit. If he's squandering the money, then he's going to be held accountable for that. All right? Like there was some guy in the boxing match who wore $1 million clothing, right? Something like that. Who was this guy that Mike Tyson fought? Jake Paul. Yeah. His clothes were like $1 million, right? Is that right? Yeah, like diamonds on it. This is ridiculous, you know. So who wears $1 million clothing, you know? But obviously, you know, I think that's advertisement. But if it wasn't, then that's like, yeah, you're gonna be responsible for wearing $1 million clothes. Yes. Starting a fiqh class, instead of the tafsir class. Sure, if you can secure me 50 students, I'll start any class on any subject that you want. But 50 students doesn't mean that 50 people say yes. Because of 20 years of my experience, 50 people say yes, that means 5 people show up. 10 this is a 10% ratio. You can get 50 people there, I'll teach any class you want. So, like in this class as well. This tafsir class will continue if 50 people can show up. Like we have, alhamdulillah, 50 people. If we can't, if it goes lower, then I will teach a different class where people will show that level of interest. Yeah, inshallah. We got to start. Yeah, okay. So we have our leader, our Amir today, Yusuf, telling us that we have to get started with Kahoot. So go ahead, Yusuf. Bismillah. دعاء سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.
Question. What does Allah command the people of the book not to do